Prince William will go above and beyond to control the monarchy's image by stripping non-royal or non-working royals of their titles.
Buckingham Palace has just released a bombshell announcement. King Charles III has finalized the legal procedures to transfer the Regency Prince Regent to the Prince of Wales, William. This morning, the King's motorcade quietly departed, the palace marking his official withdrawal from operational duties to enter a period of convalescence. William, the future king, immediately assumed control of the security and financial systems, ushering in a new era expected to be defined by transparency and discipline. However, contrary to the serene facade presented to the public, insider sources reveal a shocking development at Sandringham. During the very first intimate lunch under the new regent, Tom Parker BS and Laura Lopez, Queen Camilla's two children, were reportedly escorted forcefully from the dining table by security and removed via a side service entrance. Without a single word of farewell, they were expelled on William's direct orders, leaving witnesses stunned. Is this drastic move by William an assertion of authority? Or is it the opening shot in an all-out war against his stepmother's faction? Can Queen Camilla survive when her closest inner circle has been ruthlessly severed? And most importantly, what dark secret was uncovered that forced the new Prince Regent to act with such cruelty on his very first day in power? The transfer of power was in reality activated 48 hours before the press release appeared within a highly classified protocol at St. James's Palace. William, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit, sat across from the Lord Chief Justice and the Home Secretary. The atmosphere in the room did not carry the vibrant hues of a coronation. Rather, it weighed heavy like a military tribunal. Activating the Regency Act this time was not merely about filling a ceremonial role due to the king's declining health. For William, it was the moment he officially took hold of the sword of command to excise the tumors metastasizing within the body of the monarchy. The moment King Charles's signature on the authorization document became legally binding, William wasted no time on false pleasantries. He immediately summoned the Director General of MI5 and the Keeper of the Privy Purse, whom he had secretly appointed to replace the former personnel loyal to Camilla. The Prince Regent's first duty was not a public speech, but to seize control of the black box, the system storing all sensitive financial transactions and internal security files, previously accessible only to the King and Queen's office. For 6 months prior, William and his close advisors had quietly gathered fragmented clues. However, only with the Regency could he possess the legal authority to unlock high-level encrypted files. What appeared on the computer screen that night confirmed his worst suspicions. Financial records revealed a systematic hemorrhaging of the budget, sophisticatedly camouflaged under categories like logistic services, diplomatic event organization, and estate maintenance. At the center of this web were none other than Tom Parker BS and Laura Lopez. Forensic audit reports indicated that Camilla's children had exploited their status as extended family members to establish a network of exclusive supply companies. They did not hold titles directly, but through layers of corporate shells and tax havens, they controlled the entire supply chain for premium food, fresh flowers, and media consulting contracts for the palace. Invoices were inflated by 300% to 400% above market value. Even more gravely, William discovered expenditures for ghost events, parties that never took place or were organized on a much smaller scale than reported. This was not merely profiteering. It was blatant embezzlement protected by the Queen's soft power. The Christmas lunch at Sandringham took place against this backdrop of simmering tension. King Charles, having just undergone a long round of medical therapy, appeared weary, but tried to maintain a familial atmosphere. Seated beside him, Camilla and her two children maintained their familiar air of complacency. They laughed loudly, discussing renovation projects for their private estates in the coming year, treating the use of royal funds as an obvious privilege. They were oblivious to the fact that their position had collapsed the moment William stepped into the dining room. William sat at the head of the table, his eyes tracking every gesture of Tom and Laura with the cold detachment of a judge before sentencing. He did not eat. He merely sipped his water, waiting for the perfect moment to deliver the decisive blow. As the main course was cleared, William signaled with a slight nod. The dining room doors swung open. It was not the wine stewards who entered, but Lieutenant Colonel Thompson and 4 senior security officers from the Royalty Protection Group. The presence of armed forces in a private dining room was a taboo, shattering all protocols of royal etiquette. The atmosphere in the room froze in shock. William stood up, tossing a dark blue file onto the wooden table. The dry thud echoed like a gavel strike. "The party ends here for you, too," William declared, his voice not raised, but filled with suppressing authority. "Tom, Laura, from this moment, all economic contracts between the Crown and your front companies are terminated. State auditors will step in to recover the misappropriated funds." Tom Parker BS shot up, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This is an insult. Mother, say something. William has gone mad." Camilla sat paralyzed, her hand gripping her napkin until her knuckles turned white. She turned to look at Charles for salvation, but the king was holding the file William had thrown, his trembling hands turning the pages of statistics. The numbers spoke so clearly that they left him speechless. William gave them no chance to argue. He ordered the security team, escort them off the Sandringham grounds immediately, confiscate their access passes, and wipe their biometric data from the security system. And remember, take them out through the rear waste disposal exit. That is the only passage befitting those who leech off national assets. The scene that followed was an ultimate humiliation for Camilla's faction. Her 2 children, accustomed to walking through the front door and being treated with reverence, were now clamped by bodyguards and forcibly marched out of the dining room before the entire family. There was no mercy. William stood watching, his face showing not a flicker of pity. He knew this ruthless action was necessary to send a steel-hard message to Camilla. The era of ambiguity between public and private, between family and state, was permanently over. The event at Sandringham was like a bomb detonation. But the psychological aftershocks were what caused the heaviest devastation. William immediately returned to London that night to direct the massive review campaign, leaving King Charles and Camilla in the stifling silence of the Winter estate. This was a calculated move. He wanted to separate Camilla from the power systems in the capital, isolating her in the countryside, so she could not interfere with the audit process. However, Camilla was a seasoned politician within the palace environment. She understood she had lost a major battle, but the war was not over. She realized William's mistake lay in leaving her alone with King Charles, the weakest link in his defense system. Camilla began a psychological counterattack, targeting not legal logic, but the wounded heart of her frail husband. That night in the royal bedroom, Camilla did not argue or scream. She chose the role of a tragic victim. She wept openly, speaking of a mother's pain at seeing her children treated like common criminals on a sacred holiday. She skillfully shifted the issue from corruption to personal vendetta. "William has never accepted me," she whispered into Charles's ear, her voice trembling with grievance. "He isn't doing this for the money. He is doing this to humiliate me, to humiliate your choice. He wants to prove that you were wrong to marry me. Today it is Tom and Laura. Who will it be tomorrow? Will he throw me out on the street when you are gone? You are the king, but he is acting as if you are already dead." Those words were like venom seeping into King Charles's mind. The deep-seated fear of aging, of being forgotten, and of being overshadowed by his son began to rise. He felt his self-esteem severely wounded. He loved William, but he also loved Camilla. And above all, he wanted to protect his family's honor before the
public.
He did not want his reign to be stained by a corruption scandal. Early the next morning, Charles called William via a secure internal line. His voice was weary, but carried the commanding tone of a king. "William, I request that you stop. The matter of Tom and Laura I will handle internally. Let them withdraw quietly. Do not turn this into a public witch hunt. I do not want the final years of my life submerged in scandal." On the other end of the line in the Regent's office at Kensington Palace, William stood before a newly drawn organizational chart. He had anticipated this call. He knew Camilla would manipulate his father. "Father," William replied, his tone respectful yet hard as cold steel. "I am not doing this out of personal hatred. I am doing this for the survival of the monarchy. If I stop, I become an accomplice covering for criminals. And if the press discovers that cover-up, which they inevitably will, then not only my credibility, but your entire life's legacy will collapse. As regent, I have taken an oath to protect the throne, even if I must protect it from your personal feelings. You dare to defy my wishes?" Charles rasped, helplessness creeping into his words. "I am executing the responsibilities you entrusted to me," William affirmed. Then cut the connection. Immediately, he turned to his senior aides and issued a cold command. "Activate Isolation Protocol Level 2. Lock down Queen Camilla's entire office at Buckingham and Clarence House. Cut server access, change biometric codes, and recall all electronic devices from staff under her management. No one is permitted to remove a single piece of paper. This is now a crime scene." This move was a direct declaration of war. William was not just clipping Camilla's wings. He was stripping away her instruments of power, transforming her from a powerful queen into a wife completely isolated administratively. The lockdown of the Queen's office paved the way for a total offensive on the financial front. William did not use the old royal accounting machinery, which had been infiltrated and neutralized by Camilla's network. Instead, he brought in a task force of top forensic accountants, secretly recruited from the Economic Crime Unit, and former financial intelligence officers from MI6. They worked in a secure room in the basement of Kensington Palace, completely cut off from the outside world with no cell signal and no public internet. Their mission was to decode Camilla's financial black box. After 3 days and nights of ceaseless work, cross-referencing thousands of transactions over the past 5 years, they discovered a fraud model so sophisticated it was terrifying. Dubbed the double book system, the lead auditor presented William with a cash flow diagram as tangled as a spiderweb. "Your Royal Highness, this system is designed to bypass standard control procedures. There is a set of white books recording legitimate expenses submitted to the King's desk and the Finance Committee for periodic approval. However, existing in parallel is a set of black books, essentially slush funds disguised under the names of special operational costs and emergency contingency funds. Deeper analysis showed that money from these funds did not go to official purposes. It was funneled through a series of shell companies registered in tax havens like the Isle of Man, Jersey, and the British Virgin Islands. After multiple complex laundering cycles to erase traces, this money ultimately flowed into trust funds where the actual beneficiaries were members of the Parker BS family. But the most shocking discovery lay in the legalization process for these transfer orders. According to royal regulations, any expenditure from the special fund required the king's signature of approval. The audit team used handwriting analysis technology and cross-referenced King Charles's daily schedule to find the truth. There is a very clear repeating pattern. The analysts pointed to the timeline. The largest transfer orders worth millions of pounds were always signed at times when King Charles was in his weakest health, when he was undergoing exhausting cancer treatments or during periods of mental crisis. His signatures on these documents are often scrawled and weak, indicating he signed them in a state of not being fully lucid or while being rushed. William stared at the document copies. He recognized Camilla's tactic, the sandwiching technique. She had exploited her husband's trust, slipping money transfer orders in between massive stacks of diplomatic dispatches, greeting cards, and tedious administrative documents that Charles had to sign daily. She handed them to him when he was most tired, urging him to sign quickly to clear the work. The final clue confirming Camilla's role as the mastermind lay in a small but fatal detail. On all these fraudulent payment orders, next to Charles's signature, there was always the confirmation seal of the Queen's office, a distinctive dark purple stamp. This proved she not only knew but was the person directly controlling and approving this process before it reached the King's hand. William closed the file. A sense of revulsion rose in his chest. This was not just embezzlement. This was elder abuse. A betrayal of trust by a wife against a husband battling serious illness. He realized that these bank statements and analyses were not enough to indict a queen and convince King Charles of this brutal truth. He needed physical evidence. He needed the original transfer orders with his father's trembling signature and Camilla's seal. And they were lying somewhere in the secret archive he had not yet inventoried. News of William's forensic audit leaked to Camilla through her remaining eyes and ears in the logistics department. She was an intelligent woman with a keen sense for danger. She understood that William had found the money trail, but he did not yet have the final legal proof in hand, the original documents. If those documents disappeared, all accusations would remain speculation, and she could turn the tide by blaming administrative errors or slander. In a carefully concealed panic, Camilla decided to go Allen. She contacted Ollie, her most loyal chief bodyguard, the man who had closely protected her since the days she was condemned by the world as the other woman. Ollie was not just a bodyguard. He was a shadow, a keeper of secrets, a tool to execute dark tasks that no one was allowed to know about. The call was made via a disposable burner phone. Camilla's voice was cold, ruthless, and decisive. Ollie's safe number 4 in Archive B. You know what is inside. It is my life. Do not let it exist when the sun rises. Make it look like a localized electrical fire. Ollie understood the order. He knew the risk was extreme because William had heightened security, but blind loyalty and a debt of gratitude to Camilla made it impossible for him to refuse. At 2 a.m., Buckingham Palace was plunged in darkness. Ollie, dressed in the black uniform of the Night Watch, used his intimate knowledge of the building structure to approach the records area. He knew the camera blind spots and how to neutralize motion sensors with shortwave jamming devices. He moved like a ghost, bypassing the outer guard posts. However, Ollie had underestimated his opponent. William and his security advisors had anticipated this scenario. The lockdown of the office without an immediate raid was in fact a strategic trap. William knew the mastermind would panic and attempt to destroy the evidence. He had installed thermal sensors and micro-infrared cameras inside the storage rooms themselves, operating independently of the building's main security system. The moment Ollie used a handheld laser cutter to break the safe lock and remove the red file, a silent alarm at the security command center flashed bright red. William, watching live on a screen from Kensington, issued the order via radio. Arrest him. At the scene, just as Ollie flicked his lighter to burn the file, high-intensity floodlights suddenly blazed on, shining directly into his face and causing temporary blindness. From the shadows, Lieutenant Colonel Thompson and the tactical team stormed out. Taser guns and suppression weapons aimed straight at the target. Hands off the file, Ollie. Thompson's shout boomed through the enclosed room. Ollie attempted to resist, but realized he was completely surrounded. He was tackled to the floor and handcuffed immediately. The evidence file, the most important item in the case, was recovered intact. William had not only prevented the destruction of evidence, he had caught the perpetrator red-handed. This was the decisive turning point, shifting the matter from an administrative investigation to a criminal and national security investigation. Ollie was taken to a secret royal interrogation facility, a place with no civilian lawyers and no right to silence, in the style of ordinary police work. He faced William and the royal general. Counsel in a cold room. William began the interrogation not with threats, but with a cold analysis of the future. He placed on the table a recording of the final call between Camilla and Ollie intercepted by the Signals Intelligence Agency GCHQ under the Prince Regent's special order. Camilla's voice ordering the arson rang out clearly. "You heard that clearly, didn't you, Ollie?" William asked, looking straight into the bodyguard's eyes. "She didn't tell you to bring the documents back. She told you to burn them. She doesn't care if you escape, or not as long as the evidence disappears. If you remain silent and take the fall, you will face 20 years in prison for trespassing, destroying national property, and endangering security. Your family will lose all pension benefits and live in disgrace. She will deny all involvement, claiming you are a madman acting on your own." William slid a plea agreement toward Ollie. "But if you cooperate and reveal the full truth about her operating procedures, I will ensure you receive special witness status, reduced sentence, identity protection, and safety for your family." Ollie's loyalty collapsed before the brutal reality. He realized he was just a sacrificial pawn in Camilla's power game. He nodded, agreeing to testify. Ollie's testimony painted a panoramic picture of a conspiracy far more horrifying than initially predicted. He revealed the post-Charles safety fund. Camilla, obsessed with the fear that William would strip her of everything after Charles died, had planned to accumulate a massive independent fortune. Her goal was to siphon at least £100 million from royal assets to ensure a regal life for herself and her descendants, regardless of the new court's attitude. The cruelest detail Ollie provided was the method by which Camilla manipulated Charles. He confessed that she frequently requested the king's medication schedule from the medical department. She chose the exact times when the painkillers were most potent, leaving Charles drowsy and groggy to present financial documents for him to sign. Sometimes she even falsified reasons, claiming it was a donation for charities Charles loved. "She told me," Ollie bowed his head, his voice barely a whisper, "that the king was old and no longer lucid, and she had to look out for her own future because no one else would." This testimony was the final nail in Camilla's political coffin. It proved that her actions did not stem from love or concern for her husband, but from greed and cold calculation. She had turned the husband who loved her most into the victim of the century's greatest fraud. On that fateful morning at the private estate where King Charles was convalescing, the gray sky heralded an approaching storm. William walked into his father's study unaccompanied by an entourage carrying only a leather briefcase containing the brutal truth. King Charles sat by the window looking haggard. Camilla sat nearby reading a book. When she saw William enter with an unusually grave expression, she sensed danger. She intended to launch a preemptive attack, but William's icy glare silenced her. "Father, I need you to look at these things, and I need her to sit right there and listen," William said, his voice not loud, but heavy with weight. He laid out the evidence one by one. Statements of cash flows laundered through ghost companies, the recording of the arson order, and Ollie's confession regarding the exploitation of the king's health condition. Charles took the confession. His hands shook violently as he read the lines describing how his wife had timed his medication to trick him into signing papers. He saw his own distorted signature on orders transferring millions of pounds into unknown accounts. He heard the recording of Camilla's familiar voice coldly ordering the destruction of evidence. The collapse within King Charles did not happen noisily. It was a silent shattering. He looked up at Camilla, his eyes holding the ultimate pain of betrayal. The woman he had spent his life fighting for. The woman for whom he had accepted. The loss of reputation, even hurting his mother and children to protect, turned out to be the one stabbing him in the back, most cruelly.
Why?
Charles asked, his voice breaking hoarse like the whisper of a drowning man. I gave you everything, the crown, status, love. I never denied you anything. Why would you do this to me? Camilla burst into tears. But this time, they were no longer tears of performance. It was naked fear. I was scared. I was scared that when you were gone, I would lose everything.
They
hate me. She pointed towards William. William stood there towering like a fortress wall. You were afraid of losing money. And because of that fear, you lost the only thing protecting you, his trust. He turned to his father, waiting. Charles closed his eyes, 2 streams of tears rolling down his wrinkled cheeks. He took a deep breath, and when he opened his eyes, the look he gave Camilla had become distant. He nodded slightly to William, a nod of painful acceptance. William pronounced the sentence, his voice steely, like a judge. Under the agreement to protect royal honor, you will not face public criminal prosecution. But the price to pay is exile. You will leave here immediately. You will be taken to live in a remote mansion in Scotland. You are stripped of all public roles. Your entire budget is cut, and you will be under the highest level of financial monitoring. You and the king will live separately forever. All contact with your children will be controlled. There was no negotiation. There were no goodbyes. 15 minutes later, a black Range Rover pulled up to the hall. 2 female security officers escorted Camilla to the car. She turned back to look at the house at the window where Charles was sitting, but the curtain had been drawn. William stood on the balcony, watching the carrying Camilla disappear behind the row of old oak trees stripped of leaves. The cold wind whipped his face, but he did not feel the cold. He felt a weight of A000 lbs being lifted from his shoulders and this dynasty. The room door opened and Kate walked in, standing silently beside her husband. She said nothing, only squeezing his hand tightly. William squeezed back gently, his eyes looking toward the distant horizon where the first weak rays of sunlight were trying to pierce through the thick layer of clouds. Is it done? Kate asked softly. The deceit is over, William replied, his voice deep and resolute. Now is the time for us to rebuild everything from these ashes. A new reign truly began, not with trumpet blasts or lavish ceremonies, but with the silence of justice served and the departure of the ghosts of the past. Despite the drastic action, William's ultimate goal was to prevent his father from being exploited in sickness.
As the
initial pain fades, can we hope for genuine healing? Where William acts not only as Prince Regent but also as a devoted guardian for King Charles's final years. Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy.